I think that I think there's a tendency of all CEOs to go read books and then go try to make a book club out of every book you read because you get so excited about the new things that you learn. At least that's how I've gone. I realize that really doesn't work that well or as impactful as you'd like it to be, right? And I think this journey starts with understanding that the values we had in our business and the culture. The values were a little bit more than words.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Today we look at your core values. We do this from a very different perspective. I think a lot of people think about the values of the organization and they don't really understand what it means. Today we look at weaponizing your core values. This term weaponizing wasn't the term I would have picked for this, but I just had an interview with someone that you will love this interview. It is the co-founder of HealthJoy. His name is Justin Holland. And we talk about weaponizing your core values. They were number 142 on the Inc. list, almost 400 employees. And what you're going to learn inside this episode is what is weaponizing your core values? Why it's important? And what are the things that we see inside the organization when they are a part of it? There's a thread that runs through the values across the organization. And we talk about all of this in today's episode. Well, if you're listening in here because you want to weaponize your values, you want to really align with those values, you want to be a leader who communicates them very effectively and clearly and really creates incredible alignment and buy-in, then you want to be an extraordinary leader. All you have to do is to figure out what's getting in your way, figure out what's keeping you from being that extraordinary leader. And I really want you to think about that for a second, because if you know what's getting in your way, you know how to create strategies to overcome it. But all too often, I find that people just don't know what's getting in their way. They don't know what's the blind spot that keeps them from having what they want. They focus on other things. They focus on the things that they need to do, and they don't pay attention to things they don't need to do. Well, I can help you do this. I've been spent 10 years understanding people just like you to be better leaders, founders, CEOs of fast growth companies. You don't have to be growing fast, but you have to want to be an extraordinary leader if you want to have a conversation with me about what's next. I call this a clarity call. If you want to get free coaching, you want to get really deep into this, make sure you apply right now. Go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. It will help you be the extraordinary leader and figure out what's next. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now, here's an interview with Justin. Justin, how are you?
Good. Good to meet you, Gene.
Excited to have you on the podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
I want you to give a little bit about the company. So tell us about HealthJoy, Justin.
Yeah. So HealthJoy, our focus is how do we basically navigate employees to affordable, high quality healthcare. We do that by helping consolidate the health and wellness strategies of our customers, which happen to be kind of benefit consultants and HR is typically how we look at the world. And our job is ultimately for them to help make it easier to deliver benefits and to kind of give them that easy button, which, in this world, healthcare is getting more and more complex, and we kind of have to have care navigation at the top to help be that front door for our employees access healthcare.
I don't want to go too far into this, but this is a really near and dear topic to my life. I had a mother who's gotten sick lately, and she was covered by her pension plans and Medicare and whatnot. And she was in the hospitals and rehab for about 3 or 4 weeks. I don't even know what the bills were because they were all covered. But as an entrepreneur, I was like, what would happen if I had to go into the hospital for 4 weeks? What do you see as the future for our healthcare system here in America?
Yeah, it's challenging. Basically, think about the payer. That's where you should really think about starting. Is that the payer in this case is you and the company, right? And basically, if you have 2 buckets and you fill them both with water, right? Like they're kind of both full, meaning that the employer is kind of at the end of how much they can spend, and the employees at the end of how much they can spend. And so what's happening is basically benefit consultants, HR, everyone is trying to make, you have to reduce costs of claims somehow. So you make the network smaller, you change the way, maybe there's a no network plan that you're putting in place. You're stuffing a bunch of different point solutions in here to help obviate costs, whether it's second opinions, virtual care, et cetera. And so you're seeing all this massive amount of innovation because ultimately no one can afford to spend any more money. And that's really ultimately the problem. And there's nothing that's going to stop this cost trend keep increasing. So I think what we're going to see is you're going to see think health plans are just going to get more and more complex to try to combat that cost, because ultimately you can't keep increasing the deductibles for people because they just stop using care, which is ultimately what's been happening now. And I think you're going to start seeing a trend where it's kind of capped out. And so ultimately we see a world that's going to move to more value-based care from fee for service. It's going to be a continual evolution over the next 10 years, because ultimately people are being like, I just can't pay for this. I can pay for an outcome, but I can't pay for a task. And so I think you'll see a shift there. I think you'll see a shift that care navigation will be almost I would say a mandatory part of your health plan, because ultimately if you have to navigate across 30, 40, 50 different vendors to get all the different things you need, and to navigate, say, that 4-week stay that you have at the hospital and coordinating all the care downstream, it's just going to get more complex. I don't have a good rosy picture of the future here. It just is like more entropy and more chaos, which ultimately, you would expect, which will drive transparency, which will drive consumerism, right? Which is going to empower ultimately the employee to take more responsibility over the decisions they make. But it is not a rosy future from my perspective today. It'll be interesting to see what the transparency laws do this coming January, though.
I know we had a little bit of an alarm in that background, so sorry about that. You gave some interesting points behind this, but today we're not going to go into the healthcare. We're not going to try to address the challenges and the complexity of this, even though I'd love to have that conversation. We're going to talk about your journey in leadership and your creating this, impact that you've done through HealthJoy. You didn't do it alone. How many employees do you have?
We're about 400 people now.
And so I would expect that your journey of leadership has changed a little bit over that time. But one of the things that we've done some research on you've identified that you feel like you've got to really align operations with culture. What does that really mean in your world?
Sure. I think that I think there's a tendency of all CEOs to go read books and then go try to make a book club out of every book you read, because you get so excited about the new things that you learn. At least that's how I've gone. I realize that really doesn't work that well, or as impactful as you'd like it to be, right? And I think this journey starts with understanding that values were the values we had in our business, and the culture. The values were a little bit more than words. I had put together like a kind of a slideshow about all the different culture book. I had lifted a lot of the concepts from Reed Hastings and Netflix. I think there's a lot of great aspects of culture there, but it wasn't operationalized. It wasn't, or weaponized, right? I think it's probably a more actual proper term. And so this was it started off last August. It was post fundraise, or Series C, and I had brought in a new executive to run product, and I kind of looked at it and been like, what's my job? And I don't think I had a good answer. I definitely didn't have a good answer. I ended up working with an executive coach, which I recommend anyone to do, and kind of went through and said, hey, here's a lot of my challenges that I have. I want to push culture more. You read The Hard Things About Hard Things, or you read, Horowitz's next book about culture, or Culture Code, or whatever it is. And we all want to get there, but I didn't see like a really sustainable, simple path to make that happen. And so I ended up kind of having that be for my first thing, is like, how do we actually weaponize this concept of culture and values throughout the different aspects of our business, which ultimately, came from that kind of catalyst of kind of having I wouldn't say an identity crisis, but, a crisis of leadership, I would say.
Justin just talked about not being operationalized around the values. And you may have never heard this term before. Of course, the entire episode is around weaponizing your core values, and they're very similar. Operationalizing your core values is this concept, making sure that they're more than just something you put on the wall or you talk about at a yearly meeting. You want to make sure your values are a part of the everyday. You want to make sure they're internalized. If you really figure out all the different places that you could use values and how they're organizing and aligning your people together, and it will help you be a better leader, because these do a lot of the heavy lifting when you're not there to oversee them, which is most of the time. Because let's face it, you can't be there when you have dozens of employees or many dozens of employees, and certainly Justin has almost 400 employees. You've got to operationalize these values. I can help you do that. All you have to do is check out some of the free content we have on values to get a better feel for it. But the best way is to have a conversation with me. Are you game? Just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now back to Justin. Now, it's an interesting choice you use, weaponize. Why do you choose that word when you talk about the culture and values?
Yeah, ultimately, that's not usually a term I use internally. But, as from other CEOs, right, we're trying to make culture, it's our defense, or I don't know, or it's our offense. It is a no doubt if properly used, a dangerous weapon, right? Or it's a great weapon that can can make change. And so I think it's ultimately I would say, to win a battle, right? And I think that's how I think about it. I'm like, if we want to win this war, we all want to be part of the dream team, right? We all want to win the championship, and that's our greatest tool that we have as leaders of our business.
Appreciate you sharing with us. You mentioned this whole thing about coaching. As you know, I'm an executive coach. Part of the reason I tell these stories is because I think it's fascinating to see people who are very successful still lean on coaches. What has been the biggest benefit by having your own coach beyond just reading these books?
Yeah, I think that I think there's two different things you get out of coaching. One, you get the guru concept, right? Like, most likely they've had the same problems as you've had, or seen the problems because they've talked to other people that had the same problems. So you're able to go to them for tactical advice. And then the second piece is helping be your mirror, right? Because you're not having that same type of close relationship with your board, right? You don't feel as comfortable being as open, to your challenges and problems. And ultimately, as you also probably don't feel that comfortable going to your team in the same way, right? There's certain things that unfortunately don't lend themselves well to people internally. So having that external viewpoint that's purely unbiased, that is able to help reflect and give you that more unfiltered feedback, I have found has been what's most, and the accountability. And there's a third piece. It's the accountability, because the last thing you want to do is talk to your coach after a month and not have made progress, or have not have prioritized what you all agreed was most important.
I know they're all important. That third one is so important for me in my own coaching. I've had a coach almost the entire time over the last 20 years, and I never wanted to show up and didn't do what I said I would do, because that's just not my personality. It's not my identity. Are you the same way?
100%. I think we're all the same way with our board too, right? Last thing we want to go to the board and you get bad news. So this is like the second layer of accountability that is a little bit less risky, right? To fail, but you build a relationship, and you're spending time, you're spending money, right?
Before we jump off this idea of coaching, and I want to get back to alignment around the operations and culture. Why did you almost not hire a coach? Because they probably went through your mind, like, do I need one? Do I need this extra expense?
I'm cheap, right?
You almost didn't hire it. So where's that fear now? Is it worth it?
Oh God, yeah, no. I mean, I think it's the most impactful for every dollar spent, right? I think that there's no doubt that probably has made the biggest impact on our business. So I think that it was that, and I think it was also like a fear of like not knowing what I would talk about. Like, and I think that's like more of a vulnerability problem, right? Where it's like, maybe I didn't want to look stupid, or I didn't want to look like that wasn't like a good CEO to the coach, right? And I wasn't sure like what I'd get. I have the same problem with sometimes with like, I didn't know how to use an executive assistant, for instance. And then I started using it for scheduling. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. This is saving me like 3 hours a week. This is worth it. And I think that it was the same thing. I think I had a little bit of fear, right? About what am I actually going to get? What am I going to learn? Am I going to learn some things I don't want to know about myself? And I think that getting past that and understanding that, you have to be a leader of the whole company, and you have to level up. And the only way to level up properly, it's so hard to do it without help. It's in fact impossible. I can't imagine there's one CEO out there that's not done it with a massive amount of external help.
Now hold on, Justin just talked about the value of coaching. He said it's the most impact he's ever had on his business. Now, the way I'm interpreting that is he probably resisted coaching a little bit, because I see a lot of people resist it. You've probably resisted it. Maybe you have a coach right now. But when you think about the value of coaching, having someone to help you think through the things that are in front of you, maybe without an unbiased look, and helping you see a different perspective, is extremely valuable. But also you add in there a sounding board, someone, conversations you can't have with your board members, conversations you can't have with your team members, with your wife at home, because you just don't have context to this, what's really going on. And then finally, the accountability of it that he mentions inside this, it just really is something that I want you to think about as you grow forward as a leader. Who is leading you? Now, you may have a board, but the board has a role, and it's very different from that of coaching. You may have advisors and mentors, very different than that of coaching. So think about that for a second as you plan your journey to be a better leader, to be something that's really extraordinary. If you look back over your legacy, and it really helps to look at this. Are you making the impact that you could? Or are you focused on the day-to-day? Are you focused on the right now? The real impact that you want to make is probably getting some of the bigger things done, the things that will really define your legacy, define who you are as a leader and as an entrepreneur. This is probably what you need to talk to your coach about. back to Justin. I love the fact that you're saying this, Justin. I want to get back to our topic around values specifically. I have so many conversations with people just like you that said, we weren't really utilizing the values the way they were meant to be and the way we could be using it. You've used the word operationalizing values. How would we see inside your organization that you have rituals or habits of using these values on a day-to-day or weekly basis?
Yeah. So I'm going to start off. We framed everything around The Advantage by Lencioni. So that literally is like I would say how would I explain it? I'd say it's the framework of how we make decisions about what we should do. And so it comes down to, we're trying to create clarity, over communicate clarity, and then reinforce clarity, right? And so then what we did is we took that as like the overlying framework, and then we mapped all of our rituals that we do to each one of those different things, whether it's our annual strategy meeting, or say biannual strategy, our board meetings, our one-on-ones, our staff meetings, our director staff meetings, how we do promotions, how we do firing, how we do performance improvement plans, et cetera. And we mapped all of this stuff to those. And then we looked at all those rituals and we said, where are values operationalized into this, right? Into the say our monthly all hands, right? A good example, right? So we have, value, we do like a, value awards every staff meeting. As part of our 15-5 check-in for OKRs, there's a question of nominating someone for value, right? So as part of that process for someone to actually fill out their OKRs to update them at the end of Friday before the company meeting, they're getting a question. Would you like to nominate one for value, whatever it is, the value for the month? And, we'll get 25% of our entire employee population will answer that question, right? One quarter, we'll get 100 submissions for people to nominate. And then we're taking that, and I'm working with my executive assistant. She's doing basically she has a job to do on Monday to help order it, put it in there, and then it's done, right? And the amount of time put into that process now is almost zero, right? It naturally flows through that. And that's what I mean by operationalize, is that you have people accountable and responsible for getting it in. And that could be for our promotions. So our compensation, we have a director 360 that 20% of people's comp on bonus is connected to values. So, as part of that, we're doing 360s during this time of year. They're evaluated. HR's, people ops is telling me where there's problem areas or where there's massive discrepancies in what you think and how you actually are perceived by your peers. And then those are in coaching opportunities that are put into my process, right? And we have that concept with hiring, with firing, performance improvement, throughout all of those different rituals we have. And we're always looking for more ways to put them in. But that is that concept. We use a kind of a framework about what we're trying to get out of the ritual, make sure these rituals are actually worthwhile, not as just wasting our time. And then we're trying to thread through values in each one of them. And that way they become part of the language on a day-to-day basis, right? Like I can't, if I did right now, care is one of our core values. And if I did a search in Slack, I probably see 1,000 messages about care in the last week.
Love all that. So you are picking one value per month? Is that right?
No, it's just one of the five. So if they're nominated for one of the five, then we're just talking about them. So we're not that, I wouldn't say that we're that intentional about going through, we're not not a specific value, just more of like, hey, you're nominated for one of the core values.
I don't have this prepared, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about it because I'm preparing for my next book. I want to go kind of a speed round for you, and you can answer with short little statements, 1 or 2 sentences. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So why did you pick 5 values?
Easier to remember.
Okay. So you didn't want too many?
Correct. And
it is hard to narrow it down.
And we wanted to make sure they weren't ones that should be like table stakes, like integrity. Like integrity should be table stakes, right? You shouldn't be hiring someone if they don't have integrity.
Honesty. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So how often do you refresh them? Look back at them, make sure they're a good fit.
I think that they're it's been probably 3 years since we've changed them, but they're challenged often from a perspective of, hey, the organization thinks that we're not doing so well on say have no ego, for instance, or there's individuals, and saying there's a consistent challenging that we have. I think that ultimately the company is a lot different right now than it was 3 years ago when we built these. Probably is getting close to that time of, we have a mechanism inside of our annual strategy to have a refresh. We haven't executed.
And a lot of people have this debate over, do we do values that are natural or do we do values that are aspirational? Where did you come down on that?
Yes. So if you have 5 aspirational values, then you have completely you're inauthentic. right? I am a strong believer. I think, Lencioni's got a great section on this in his book, The Advantage. They have to be authentic. You maybe can handle one aspirational value. And yes, I completely, it's okay to have aspirational, and it's okay to tell the organization that you're trying, you have that as being aspirational. But if you are saying that this is our core value and every one of your people is looking at you being like, what are you talking about? You're, whatever it is, right? You have the biggest ego in the company. And you're telling me the biggest thing is have no ego. Like that wouldn't be that doesn't work.
When you look back over the organization, you probably tried some things. What's your favorite way of having the values expressed across the organization?
Favorite way? It's tough. So I think there's a personal favorite. There's a difference between favorite and favorite for the company. The best thing for the company is values and behavior, and in the promotion, in the hiring process, and making sure that the behaviors of those values are crystal clear to the entire hiring team. And if you get that right, you'll know it, because 3 months later, you're going to have a guy or girl on your team that is a perfect culture fit. And there is no better feeling than being intentional about the behaviors that make up your value. And that's the biggest impact for the business. What my favorite is when I see 100 people submitting people for values and seeing it on Slack. Just more of a selfish, probably favorite than actual. It helps, I think, for the whole business, but definitely on the hiring side, it's more impactful.
Justin, this is going to be a challenge for you, but you've had many stories of this, and you can name the employee by name. I think they'd be proud to listen to this episode and realize that you picked this out. But what's the story that really stands out of one of those employees that has demonstrated the values of your company?
Oh man, there's so many. Probably say Jacqueline Rose, our head of product marketing. We did it's tough for me to think about one thing. And I think that's really, when you look at values, what is a culmination of all the different behaviors and activities this person has done? And we did this kind of during one of my management courses I ran. It was who's the person that you would, that embodies the values the most. And she was nominated like 3 times more than any other person in the entire organization across it. And it was everything. It was like how accountable she is for her projects, for her ability to produce, that she's incredibly open to, all the different opportunities that we have in the business, because product marketing is a tough position. It gets pulled by everybody to do everything, right? Whether it's product, sales, marketing, et cetera. And so in that position, I realized how unintentionally I hired a perfect person. We were lucky to hire the perfect person who's very, very open in that job, because it's really, really hard. How much she cares about the user and our members and our customers, and the multiple different examples of her with conversations on both sides, trying to get to the truth of what's going to be best. And so it was just like, it was a culmination of, it was all the value being expressed into one person. And I thought that was incredible.
One final question, Justin, as we land this plane. I shared with you my impossible question earlier, which goes like this: as a leader of a fast growth company, what's more important, your customers or your employees?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We obviously everyone here is going to say their employees, right? And I think that, and ultimately you look at the best companies like Amazon, it's very clearly customer first. And I think that ultimately when I look at both of that, we might be mission first, then employees, and as far as like how we actually kind of think about things. It's a great question, because Disney would definitely would disagree, right? With probably how a lot of us are running businesses. And I think we're all running our businesses that way because our people during the growth phase, they're probably, it's tough, because the thing is like, it's about hiring, and it's about retaining, and it's about making sure that these people are, that our people are incredibly energized about the mission that we're trying to accomplish. And so I think we tend to, when you're growing by double every year, it's really tough. It's a really tough question. So I don't really have a good answer.
Well, you picked employees, so I'm going to go with that. I know it's impossible because we are here to serve our customers, but my hope is those employees that are demonstrating the values of the company truly are serving your customers with the same values, and that's really the point. Justin, thanks for being here on the show.
Cool. Thanks, Gene. Appreciate it.
I take a moment here to wrap up this, just to reflect back on what I've heard. My job is to help you be the best leader you can be. And one of the things that Justin talked about was the importance of people, importance of culture across this, and how he uses values. I know we spent a lot of time on this, but a lot of leaders just don't know how to use the values, don't know how to really bring them into the day-to-day conversation and operationalize them. So hopefully today's insights have helped you. If you want to be an extraordinary leader, you want to take your leadership to that next level, maybe you're not sure what to do next, or how to focus your time, or how to align people, whatever the question may be, I want to offer myself up the chance to talk about what those are. I can help you see the blind spots spots. I can help you identify how to move next. And all this is for leaders that want to be extraordinary. So just go to genehammett.com, schedule your call. I'd love to talk to you. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.